Hello and welcome to Checking the Vitals, a podcast powered by SpecialtyCare. I'm Todd Schlosser, and in this, our second episode of the Heart of the Operation series, we talked to Kirti Patel, a national clinical specialist and area clinical manager for perfusion at SpecialtyCare. We discussed the history of perfusion schooling from its early beginnings in the 1960s through today. We also discuss what led a lot of perfusion schools to shut down and how Kirti started a perfusion school to help reverse that trend. Enjoy the conversation. So joining me today is Kirti Patel. He is a national clinical specialist and area clinical manager in Houston for perfusion. And you may remember Kirti because Kirti did a special guest episode of the podcast back when COVID-19 started. And you spoke on the perfusionist perspective on COVID-19. And thank you so much for doing that. And if you're interested in that, please go back and listen to that. But today I wanted to talk to you because you have a lot of experience with perfusion as a field, but also perfusion schooling or education, you might say, right? And I would love to talk to you about sort of the history of perfusion schools and sort of how that process works for, people who are interested in going through the programs. But let's start off with the history of it. So I've realized perfusion has sort of as a quote unquote procedure has been around since like the 30s in a very remedial sense, like when Charles Lindbergh developed the perfusion pump, right, with another doctor, with a doctor. Sorry, he wasn't a doctor. But it's evolved a lot over time, especially through the 50s and stuff. When did perfusion school start to become a thing?
Okay, so, the first organized program that we had was actually a Cleveland Clinic, and that was back in 1963.
Okay.
And then Ohio State was pretty much in 1969. It was the first university-affiliated program. So, perfusion school started back in the early 60s. And then back in the, 70s, you started having a lot of interest in perfusion schools, and a lot of schools started opening, such as, Texas Heart Institute has been there since the 70s as well. So, but 63 was the original birth of a truly organized perfusion education program. And also the way things were done back then, believe it or not, our ABCP, which is American Board of Cardiovascular Perfusion, is actually what certifies perfusionists today.
Okay.
But back originally, they were the ones that were actually accrediting perfusion programs. There's a new organization that actually now accredits perfusion program. So originally it was our certification board that actually did it. So it's kind of interesting. And at one point it was also American Medical Association was also doing accreditation for perfusion education. And they kind of gave that back up, I believe in the 1984-ish area.
Okay.
And KHAP was born at the time, and that's a Commission on Accreditation of Allied Health Education Program. And they basically, they accredit 32 different allied health programs today, and perfusion is one of them.
Oh, okay. So they sort of are maybe not governing board, but they are the accreditation board for many different specialties, and perfusion just being one of them.
Correct. And within that KHAP, you basically have different committees that are set up. So it's kind of gets really confusing for, students like, which organization are we talking about? Because underneath KHAP, we have accreditation committee on perfusion education. So it stands for ACPE.
Okay.
So that actually is the governing board that actually polices perfusion education, and they report to KHAP, who actually then gives the accreditation forward.
Okay.
So the ACPE is actually made up of 7 different organizations. It's a very diverse group. It includes the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. It includes ABCP members. It includes AMSEC members, program directors, council members. So it has 14 members on it from 7 different organizations that actually govern perfusion education.
Excellent.
And they report to KHAP.
So, and just to make sure I understand, ACPE is sort of like where you submit as a perfusion school your curriculum to, and they decide whether your curriculum is worthy of accreditation. Is that at all correct?
Well, the curriculum is standard. So ACPE actually has a curriculum that every school has to follow. It's a 102-page document.
Okay.
That every school, whether you're a bachelor's program, a certificate program, or a master's program, everyone has to abide by that curriculum. They are the ones that actually have the standards and the guidelines that you have to follow. So they are actually the ones that are going to actually come and grant you that, yes, you have a valid support to start a perfusion program. There's something called a self-study that you have to do. Basically, you're grading yourself. It's extremely extensive. The one I did about 5 years ago as a program director was about 1,400 pages in length. So it's extensive review of yourself and your program. That's submitted to ACPE, and they actually come and do an on-site evaluation before they actually give you a green light that you have a valid program here. They do about a two-day on-site visit, all the way from students all the way to the top of who the sponsor is. And for most of the university level programs, it's the dean, or they're even up to the president level. So it's pretty extensive visit.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that they took over accrediting in like the 1980s.
1994 is when actually KHAP took over everything.
Okay.
So between the early ages of 84 all the way to 94, there were 3-4 different organizations that went through that process till KHAP was born.
Okay.
And as far as back in 1993, as an example, we have about 37 different perfusion programs.
Wow, okay.
And so that kind of went down over the years, and I'd say over the last 5-6 years, it's been 16, 17.
Really?
We've had some schools. Yeah. We had programs that have opened up, but then we've also had programs that have closed down, So, most recently we lost Cooper University program about 3, 4, 5 years ago. And then most recently last year, we lost the program out of New York.
Okay.
But then, we gave birth to our sponsor, the program we sponsor, Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
And then you had the UT Health program. And now the newest program that you have out there is Hofstra University also has a program now. And then they are on the horizon. There are other programs. I just saw that there's a program that's going to be starting very soon. They're in candidacy status right now with ACPE. And it's actually out of Utah. University of Utah has a program that's starting probably next year. With the School of Medicine there. And then I've also heard rumors of potentially another program in Tennessee and one in Ohio coming up. So, things are changing. You have schools closed down, but I think there's been, because of the shortage that we've seen, there's estimations that the shortage of perfusions may last 10 years. And so, I think there's been an interest in developing new programs and new schools.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a little surge in programs coming up because of the shortage.
Interesting.
So, which is great for our profession.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great for your profession, getting more people interested in it and younger people interested in it, and, getting them to fill those positions that are very, very needed. Now, if, obviously it seems like 17 or 16 perfusion schools may be the bottom of where we end up as we're adding new perfusion schools going on. But how did we end up going from 37 in the country to like 16 or 17? Do you know what played factors in all of those like 20-ish schools closing down over the course of 20, 30 years?
I could tell you that, having a perfusion education program, is extremely challenging.
Yeah.
Just even starting one is extremely challenging. Cost is a huge issue. A lot of these programs, because, you can, there's competition, obviously. Tuition for schools, range from anywhere in the high teens, about $18,000, and they go up to 50, 60, even more, so they can be very costly. And pretty much any of these programs, you can't work while you go in school. These programs are extensive, require extensive demand from students. So they can't work during that time either. So, your cost of living is incorporating to that. So, you're looking at loans that can be pretty extensive when these students are done with their education. So as far as schools closing, the challenges that schools face, the costs, the burden of cost for universities or the sponsoring institution, over time, they just lose interest. You really need these champion sponsor behind each school that is dedicated and determined to have a program. And if you don't have this champion, then, it's very easy for administration and the bean counters to say, what, this is not worth our time. It's just too much hassle. There's difficulties and challenges in trying to get perfusionists to teach. It's not always easy. Perfusionists are clinicians by nature. They're not be educators, and there's a smaller percentage of people that actually has a desire to teach. And so to ask a perfusionist, hey, you're going to do your clinical portion, now you're going to go to class and do lectures and talk to students, teach, it's asking a little bit. And so, there's a lot that don't have no interest in it. They're great clinicians and they have a wealth of knowledge. But, it's fair to say, okay, well, if they don't want to teach, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they want to be done, not go teach a lecture. I completely understand that, yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of those challenges, but, and when those schools opened, there was also a lot of surplus of perfusionists everywhere, it wasn't easy to get a job. When I graduated back in the late 90s, there were certain spots that were open, and I had to be willing to move. Otherwise I don't have a job, and so, today the students have a luxury that, hey, take your pickings, we didn't have that kind of luxury before. And, because you had a lot of perfusion students graduating and things like that, some of the schools just started losing interest, and, we lost schools. We had some of the finest schools in the country, that shut down, and finances is a huge factor in it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And support.
So when you say, schools really need a champion or a sponsor, does like SpecialtyCare has done with Thomas Jefferson, is that
right?
Is that sort of providing a financial incentive for them to keep the school open, or is it more or less just sort of a partnership between, hey, we can help provide you with teachers and supplies, or how does one become a sponsor of a perfusion school or a champion, as you say?
Okay, so the situation with us is with Thomas Jefferson. We sponsor him. We're our efforts as a company is to show that, hey, we support perfusion education, and we really do. We do so many different things in education, and we have a true passion for students. And the graduates and what they do in the schools. And so this was just one step that we've taken. We have our perfusion scholarship. That's another example of how we support students. Extend $20,000 scholarship for them to attend any school. It's not just a SpecialtyCare sponsored program. That shows that we support students and perfusion education. So when you talk about the other schools and you talk about sponsors, is it a university? Is it, for example, the program with Thomas Jefferson? Well, you have a backing of Thomas Jefferson University.
Yeah.
That's considered a sponsor. For us being industry sponsor, that helps them a lot, in equipment and supplies and things like that.
Sure.
Because it's a huge burden. The heart-lung machine is expensive. A high-fidelity simulators such as Calypha and Orpheus are expensive. They run in the $150,000 range, just for the capital, and then the support of personnel to run the equipment. So, sponsorship comes in various ways. Whether it's from a direct university or us as industry, how we support students and other perfusion programs.
Now, you have started a perfusion school, and you've sort of built it up over the course. I believe you were there for 5 years, correct?
Correct.
So what was that like, starting a school from the ground up? You literally went in and there was no school there. You left 5 years later and it was a thriving program. So how do you go from nothing to a thriving program? That seems very impressive to me. So I have so many questions about that.
Yeah. So again, I go back to, what it took was, a person or, a group of individuals that really have a desire that's driving this forward. So, we basically had a group of physicians that said, hey, we want a perfusion education program as a pillar of this program. And, they took it straight to administration, to a dean level, to the president level, and they didn't let up. And that's what
Awesome.
It took. And, so the footwork that was done by me makes it a lot easier, where I don't have to deal with those political agendas.
Sure.
Hey, what is that? Yeah, I have to do a lot of proposals on budget and finance and stuff like that. But
Sure.
It made my job a lot easier to open up a program, because then it's just knowing, what are the standards, what are the guidelines, what is step 1 through step Z. And I'll tell you, that part of it alone was extremely challenging. It took me a good year and a half to actually design the program, the curriculum, to get the candidacy status, and then of course, accepting the first class. the first year that you accept students, you're not accredited.
Right.
You know?
I was going to ask that. Yeah. So how do you get people to come to a school that's not accredited with the hope that it will one day be accredited?
Correct. So what happens is, you know, all the students that apply, you know, they actually, during the interview process, so we basically designed a memorandum of understanding with the students that, hey, we're going to show everything we have on the table, and, you know, we're 99% confident we're going to get accreditation. Sure. Look at what we've done, you know, and we let them meet their leadership and, you know, various things. So to build their confidence that, hey, they've done their work, you know. And so, but again, ultimately they're signing that, hey, if by any chance that year, by the time they graduate, if we're not accredited, you know, the school's not accredited, they're not going to be able to sit for board. So, you know, they are kind of guinea pigs for the program, you know. Sure. But we really had no issues, you know, the first class, any, you know, students trying to being completely worried about it. They were pretty confident by the time they were done, you know, with the interview process. And once they started school, they really saw the extensive work that was put into the program. Right. So, but yeah, it is a little scary for those first batch of students that come in. Absolutely.
It's a little bit of a gamble, sure. And it's sort of a gamble for you as sort of an administrator on the side of the school. You really don't want these people to go to school with you and then not be able to do the job they're trying to learn how to do. So it's a gamble on both sides, and that's got to be a little stressful. So how do you go about, school has started, we've got our first class in, how do we get accredited? Mm-hmm. How do you go from class started to accreditation?
Okay, so the process of accreditation kind of, you know, never stopped from the birth of the idea, right? And so basically what you have to do is there's something called a self-study that you have to submit. So this program that we started was basically a one-year program, started in January, graduation is in December. And so, you know, I had the first 4 or 5 months of the program, you know, not just instituting the program, but also starting to write up my self-study, again, going from, you know, this is the curriculum, this is the sponsor, this is our administrative support, this is our faculty support, this is the status of the faculty, they're all certified, their resumes, their certifications, right, all the way down to what we've implemented to safeguard the students, because there's an extensive standards and guidelines you have to follow, and a self-study that tells you, hey, you got to show us all this stuff. Who's the medical director, you know, their CVs, and pretty extensive. Like I said, it was about the total from page 1 to page X at the end was about 1,500 pages. So it was extensive.
Wow.
Yeah. Extensive. So we submitted that, they review it, and they actually come, you know, two members of the ACP out of the 14 actually come for an on-site visit. It's about a 2-day process, and they have interviews with the program director. They do an on-site tour. They go to the ORs. They go to all the facilities, their clinical site. They meet with the, you know, administrative support. They meet with the medical directors, and of course, all the way to the leadership at the very high end. They met with the dean, and then at the end, they actually meet with the students and spend time with the students and ask them about their feedback, what the 4 months, 5 months they've been in the program, how they feel about it. So it's an extensive visit. And after that visit, a report is generated by ACP and submitted to KHAP. And then the KHAP board meets and they take recommendations from the ACP. And then a letter is granted from KHAP granting the program accreditation, their first accreditation.
So how long does that process take? Because it sounds like it takes years.
Yeah, you know, from the optional candidacy status, for example, like right now, you know, so the optional candidate status is basically a mock self-study type thing that you can apply for. You pay a fee, and they'll come. This was before the school even started, and you know, they basically, and you pay a fee, and they come and they say, okay, we'll give you what looks good and what you may need to work on a little bit. Okay. And so it's just kind of a feedback thing, and it's a good you know, I highly recommend programs that are open to really look at that because it gives you a lot of feedback. And that way, when your self-study and your official visit actually comes in play, everything is good, you know, because when we finish our accreditation process, you know, there were 0 deficiencies that were found in the program, and the program was granted a full 5-year accreditation. So I believe most, the programs can be either 3 to 5 year accredited, and that's your initial accreditation process. So for that program that I started, it was accredited back then in November is when it was granted. So it was literally, during Thanksgiving, when I found out that, hey, the program accredited, and told the students, hey, you get to graduate next month. Congratulations.
I'm sure they were thrilled. Yeah. So what kind of program was yours? Because I realize there's like certificate programs, there's master's programs. So what are those levels, and what levels did you guys do?
Okay. So, unfortunately for perfusion education, there's no single entry level of education. A lot of the programs have shifted, your physical therapy, your nursing, all those different programs are starting to get to more of a graduate level as an entry level. Even pharmacy has gone into PharmD level now. There's no bachelor's programs and things like that.
Sure.
So, most programs have been converted to either a doctorate level or a master's level program. So perfusion still is certificate level. It could be a bachelor's level, or it could be a master's level. And today with the 17 programs we actually have, we do have all 3 programs. 6 of them are certificate level. We have 2 programs that are still bachelor's, and there's 9 programs that are master's level now. And the programs can range from anywhere, from 1 year for certificate programs all the way up to 22 months, 24 months, for master's level. So, they vary a lot, so students, usually look at, this is only a 1 year program. Yeah, I get a certificate, but my return on investment is quicker,
Sure.
So they look at a 1 year program. Students that like a little more, slower paced, organized, more of a, organized education where, academic a little bit more before you get into the clinical, they may choose the 2 year program at a university level type program. And then loans are also very important, because some of these programs that are 1 year programs, because they may be a workforce training program, you cannot apply for financial aid through the university, even though there's a sponsored university.
Okay.
You have to get private loans, which becomes difficult and kind of expensive. So, that's very important for students to also investigate before you apply to a program, if you can actually apply to their university financial aid, because some of these programs you can. It's all private loans or family help. So that's a very important aspect to look at when students are making decisions for schools.
So let me ask this, because from what I understand, you can't just be someone off the street going into perfusion school. You got to have a college degree on some level. And does it have to be a certain type of college degree? Like does it have to be sort of a bioscience degree, or like could you have a degree in literature and then you decide you want a huge career change and go to perfusion school?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and a lot of people have asked me that before, and of course, if you have a bachelor's degree in some kind of medical sciences, whether it's, you're an exercise physiology, or you were a medical technologist, or you were, some kind of anything laboratory or research related or nursing field or respiratory therapist, those are all excellent backgrounds.
Sure.
As a stepping into perfusion. But, a lot of the students applying, recently in the last 5 years have, some of them come straight out of college, with a biology degree or a chemistry degree, as long as they have the prerequisites and have a bachelor's degree, a lot of them can apply, to schools. And I'll be honest with you, when my experience of interviewing students for 10 plus years, there's no magic bullet. I've had students come into program that have had a, strong nursing background, excellent critical care nursing foundation for years, and come into perfusion school and just, they don't even graduate,
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then, and then I'll, one of my strongest students I've ever had, was a hockey coach, believe it or not, was a hockey coach, he had a bachelor's degree,
Sure.
So, he was determined, he was driven. So, yes, education, what your background is important, whether you're coming from
Sure.
a medical background or not, but it's the drive that the student has, the applicant has, and, how badly they want it. That's the key. And a lot of times you can't, as an interviewer, you can't tell. So, again, no magic bullet. We try to do the best we can, but sometimes we make bad decisions. It's tough making decisions because there are students that don't get accepted that could have been excellent, and
Sure.
You've changed their livelihood.
Yeah.
It's a tough job.
Yeah.
It's a tough job.
Absolutely. So there are different levels of programs, right? You got master's programs, certificate programs, like we just talked about. When someone graduates from those programs and are starting to enter the job market, is it easier to get a job if you have a master's program level or if you have a certificate level? Like, what is the difference there?
In today's market, it makes absolutely no difference
because the
whatsoever,
shortage?
because it's right.
Yeah.
But if someone does have a master's degree, it does, depending on who's hiring, right? If it's a person that's entering at a university level, it's a program that's pretty high acuity. They're doing transplants, things like that. If this person has an interest in possibly teaching, and if it's a teaching institution, they may tend to want to hire a person with a master's degree,
Sure.
right? So it depends also on the institution you're applying at. But any given hospital that you're applying for a job that's a standard, cabs, valves, nothing extensive, a few ECMOs here and there, absolutely no difference,
Okay.
Universities tend to recognize a master's degree a little bit more. And it may be a little value, but again, we don't have an entry level. So there's really, at this moment, there's no disadvantage of having a certificate education. I myself went through a certificate program at Texas Heart.
Yeah.
Got a great education, and then later on I said, I'm going to keep teaching, and so pursued a master's degree later on.
Sure.
Through an education program. So you can always go and go back and get your master's degree at a later time too. But as far as getting a job in this market today, no, it makes absolutely no difference.
Does it? It seems like it might sort of play a difference depending upon the career track you want to have. So if you want to stay sort of in academia, you may want to go with the master's type level program. And if you want to stay on the clinical side, certificate programs are perfectly fine for that. Although I have talked to a few perfusionists that are currently or have gone through certificate programs, and some of them have in confidence told me that it's breakneck and they were not prepared for how quickly they had to learn everything. Yes. I mean, they were able to do it fine and graduate, but they did openly admit that it was more work than they thought it would be, because it's not like going to college, because you're learning everything that most people take 22 months to learn in 12, and
right.
You're not missing curriculum to shorten it, right?
Right.
It's long days,
right.
And so I do want to put that out there. I know a lot of people are thinking, well, 12 months is much shorter than 22. I'll just do that. But you got to keep in mind, you're learning all the same stuff.
And that's the thing, you got to let the students, you have to let them, you have to recognize that in front of them, and you have to explain that very clearly. And, because it's extensive, pretty much what I've always told those students is, the year that you're here in this program, your life is on hold. There's no birthday parties. There's no anniversaries. There's no wedding. If you have children, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to be home for their birthday, And I'm blunt about it because it's the reality. You don't want to draw a false image of what the program is going to be like, But these students in a shorter program, they spend 70, 80 hours a week, And you have to cover the entire curriculum. There's no shortened of a program, So that means a lot of it is left up to them for self-learning. A lot of it. They have to go home after a 10-hour clinical day and, learn that material, because guess what? Tests are coming every couple of days.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty packed schedule.
Yeah. So, Kirti, thank you so much for taking the time. I realize we are sort of out of time, but you have already graciously agreed to do more than one of these, and there definitely is more to talk about. So be looking out for Kirti's next episodes, where we sort of continue the conversation on schooling for perfusion.
Thank you, Todd, for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to Checking the Vitals. If you enjoyed the content we provide, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. It really does help people find the show. And make sure you subscribe so you hear our interviews with healthcare innovators every Monday.